I just returned from trekking through Armenia. I had a great time. I saw a lot of amazing things, so I want to share some of my experiences and the highlights of the trip with you. Well, I want to start with a map of Armenia. You can see the nation of Armenia here. It borders Turkey in the west, Georgia in the north, Azerbaijan in the east and part of the south, and then part of Iran as well in the south. So Yerevan is the capital of Armenia. There are over 1 million people who live there. It is a massive city and it is very beautiful. People are very nice. It feels like a very safe city, very modern city. So the landmark that dominates the view of Yerevan, especially on a nice clear day, is Mount Ararat. If you've ever read the book of Genesis, you know how significant Mount Ararat is. Noah and his family landed in the ark on Mount Ararat after the flood. So massive mountain, absolutely stunning, really pretty, snow-capped peak, really amazing to see. So we started in Yerevan and then we traveled south toward the southeast of Armenia. We did a lot of hiking and trekking down here near the borders of Azerbaijan and Iran. And then we traveled back up through Yerevan all the way up to the Lori province, made it to Alaverdi, which is a decent sized city, and we were near the nation of Georgia. So we did a lot of hiking and camping in Lori as well. So, as I'll show you, the countryside is extremely beautiful and it changes as you travel throughout Armenia in stunning ways. Okay, so here's my view of Yerevan from my hotel. This was an overcast day, so you couldn't see Mount Ararat at this time from the city. But a really nice valley, and I heard a river below. So, really neat place to start out in Armenia. Well, I went to a cafe the next day in the center of the city of Yerevan. This was pretty close to the government district. Lots of really nice cafes, great pastries, great coffee. Toward the right of this cafe area, you have this really nice plaza. You have a statue here of a famous Armenian architect, and then this monument is known as the Yerevan Cascade. So really pretty area, lots of great picture opportunities. And as you can see, I got lunch, and I'll let my lunch speak for itself. So Armenia is a first world nation. It is very modern. Yerevan has become a tech hub. You don't have to worry about the food or the water. The water is potable. It is drinkable. So lots to do, lots to see, a lot of really nice things in Yerevan. Well, we started to make our way down south for a trek, and all of a sudden on a road, we were completely surrounded by sheep. And so we had to stop the car. Sheep were just literally all around us, and it took a few minutes to move on. But we saw a couple of the shepherds. They were on donkeys or horses. So this was pretty cool to see. Well, we made it to a very famous fortress called Amberd. This is a 10th century fortress. Just let that sink in. This is about 1,000 years old. It is known as, or the name Amberd means fortress in the clouds. So as you can see, a very apropos name. We were enveloped in a cloud. So this is part of the ruin. You're able to walk all throughout this fortress. And what I really like about these old fortresses in Armenia is that there are secret passageways. So we found this secret passageway which led out back so someone could escape or get water if needed and if there are enemies nearby. So Armenia is known for just an amazing amount of old, ancient fortresses and churches. They are all throughout the country. And some are famous like this one where you have a lot of people going to see it. And others take a lot of effort to get to. They're on the top of mountain peaks, and we did see some of those. So nearby, we saw the church here. It's called Valramashin Church from the 11th century. You can see the front of it here. It did look like it was still in use in some shape or form. You can see the entire building right here. So we had a great time seeing this. Again, we're in a cloud. And then after we saw this church, we decided to do some bushwhacking. We traveled or hiked down this mountain. It was very steep, very wet. We got through this brush here. We got all the way down to the river, and then we went back up. This area reminded me of the Scottish Highlands, in particular Glencoe Valley. You had very steep mountains, very green mountains, and you had mist being blown, rain being blown through this valley. And so that definitely reminded me of Glencoe Valley in Scotland. Okay, I want to show you what it looks like to travel by car through Armenia. Again, this is in the southern area. We're traveling down south. You have all kinds of beautiful mountains and foothills, and then you have gigantic snow-capped peaks. So what's really interesting is that as you travel through Armenia, the scenery changes like every 5 minutes. So it's really hard to read or to read the newspaper in a car because the scenery is just so beautiful and you're constantly taking pictures. Again, it just changes right in front of you in dramatic ways within minutes. Okay, so here is one of the most beautiful panoramas I witnessed in Armenia. Again, we are in the southern area, and you have foothills, you have beautiful fields, you have snow-capped mountains, and this view was stunning all the way around. This is just one angle here in this plain surrounded by mountains. Okay, so down south in the southeastern part of Armenia, near the Azerbaijan and Iranian borders, there is a very famous and unique town called Kinzaresk. Now, this town is abandoned. It's no longer lived in, but it is something of a museum now. There are 1,800 cave houses. You can see some of them here, and some are in the distant background. Some of these cave houses would have taken hours to hike to. But in its day, there were about 8,300 inhabitants, 27 shops, 7 schools, 3 churches. We saw one of the churches right here. Pretty big structure. And so to get to this area, we hiked down a mountain here. There were steps all the way down. There was a tiny little museum showing what it was like to live in this area, in this community. And a guy gave us a tour of that museum. He was actually born in this community when it was thriving and when it was populated. So we hiked across this suspension bridge. It was a huge drop below us. That was pretty cool to see. And then we just explored, and we saw a lot of the cave houses. Some looked pretty big, like they housed a family or two. Others looked like bachelor pads. So this view is really stunning. When I was approaching the suspension bridge, I looked out toward my right, and this was the view. It was pointed out to me that I believe this mountain right here was or is Azerbaijan. So pretty amazing to see that view. Okay, so I recommend this location if you're ever in Armenia. It is worth taking a look at this area. So we did our first major trek in a place called Halidzor. So we started up on the mountain and we trekked through this village, and we made it all the way down to the valley floor and to the river. This took us about 3.5 hours at least, maybe 4 hours to get down to the bottom here. We camped in this location, got to set up a nice camp, and it rained very hard at night. So the next day, the river was swollen, moving very fast, and thankfully there was a bridge that we used to cross over. But a lot of fun. We trekked throughout this entire area the next day and saw a lot of really amazing views. So Halidzor, I definitely recommend it for a trek. Okay, so that day or the next day when we were hiking through Halidzor, we tried to get across a road, but it was flooded, as you can see. We were trying to get to a monastery. But this worked out because we retraced our steps, went up a mountain, took another way, and we ran into some Armenians who were taking a coffee break at their house, and they invited us over. So we had some coffee, we had what looked like Armenian scones and some Armenian candy. We had a great time. Now, Armenians speak Armenian, of course, but most of the adults speak Russian as well. So our tour leader thankfully knew some Russian, and we also had a translation app on our phone, so we were able to communicate. They were growing honey. They had all kinds of beehives, and I believe these gentlemen worked at a local power plant, which we passed by. So they did offer to take us up the mountain in a very old vehicle. This is a Soviet Union era vehicle. You see these all over the place. They last forever. Pretty cool to see. And so we put our heavy packs in the car, and a couple of the guys on our trip went in the car here, and they took them up the mountain. So this definitely saved us a lot of energy and time. So this was a really good experience. The Armenians were very hospitable, and we had a great time with them. Okay, so in the south, there is a very famous monastery called the Tatev Monastery. This is from the 9th century. This is in southeastern Armenia. You can see a great shot of this monastery here. I do believe this particular monastery was damaged in an earthquake, and so they did rebuild it somewhat, but you're looking at a monastery from the 9th century. There are some very famous images, photographs of this monastery online. I do encourage you to check it out. You see this monastery from another angle, from the back side or the other side here. And there's a wall here with lots of rooms inside and storage places underground. And there is a cliff. You can't see it from here, but there's a cliff on the other side. So from this room, the other part of this room, you were overlooking a cliff, but so pretty amazing. But by the time we got out of these rooms, it was completely changed. A cloud had completely surrounded us. We were within a cloud here, so the view completely changed. This monument here, this pillar, is really interesting. A long time ago, this was actually kind of like an early warning system. It would totter or move back and forth if there were troop movements in the area. So if there were a bunch of people marching toward the monastery, this would start to move. So it would function as an early warning system. It does not work like that anymore. I think it was damaged in the earthquake or something in the past. So whoever was working on this was not able to get it to work like it once did, but pretty interesting to know that. This is a secret passageway which we found inside one of the rooms in the wall. It led out back toward the cliff. So when we walked out here or crawled out here, we were on the cliff. So someone could escape or climb down the valley to get water. Okay, so the Tatev Monastery, very famous, worth going to see. Well, nearby, we also decided to see the Great Hermitage of Tatev. This is from the 17th century. This is a massive valley and a massive mountainous area. There is a long, I think the longest in the world, cable car that takes you across the mountains. But we decided to hike down toward the left here, but the river was completely flooding over the road. So we didn't think we were going to be able to make it at first, but we decided to try to go around the right side. Thankfully, we found a path, and we did make it to the front here of this hermitage, got inside, and we met the monk. There is a monk who lives here full time. He lives here every day. I think he's been here about 8 years. He was growing beans here, and so he talked to us for a little bit. There are rooms that line the entire perimeter area here where folks used to live, and you can see the main sanctuary here. We went inside. It was absolutely stunning. He had a prayer book in his hand. This is an Armenian prayer book. I asked if I could take a picture, and he allowed me to take a picture. So it was pretty cool to speak with this gentleman. Again, we had to use a translation app. He knew Russian. Our tour guide knew a little bit of Russian. So really cool. So he is there full time. He supports himself, and I think it sounded like sometimes people bring him food, maybe some friends, but he is self-supporting, and he prays and probably studies the Bible full time in this monastery, in this hermitage. Okay, so we decided to hike up the mountain. You can see the hermitage down here. So we had come up a long way at this time. But this was the toughest trek of the trip. We were going straight up the mountain. And so this took us about 3.5 hours. We were trying to get back to our town and to where we were staying. This is pretty dry here, but it was very wet and muddy. And also very clear to us that some cows had been up and down some of the paths, so we had to be very careful walking in those areas, as you can imagine. So we actually had a dog that spotted us before we got to the Hermitage in a small little tourist area, and it followed us the entire way to the Hermitage and then all the way up the mountain. And it was pointing out different places for us to go, different pathways, different shortcuts, and it did a great job. It was scaring some cows off the path. So very helpful dog. We told the dog that, hey, if you go all the way up with us, we will give you some chicken shawarma, which is very famous in Armenia. And so we eventually did that. So we got some dinner, some barbecue, and this is mushroom soup. I do recommend the mushroom soup. I had it several times in Armenia, and it was very good. Okay, so next, we started to make our way back up to Yerevan to do some hiking in the north. So we did stop at a cave. Armenia has a lot of caves. This is known as Magellan Cave. This one is built out for tourists to see. We went through all kinds of passageways. It was lighted up nicely. This is the main room of the cave. There was evidence that humans lived in this cave a long time ago. They did offer a more extreme tour, but we decided just to do the main tour of the cave. Our tour guide was a very nice young woman. Her grandfather actually found the cave decades ago, so that was interesting to hear about. Okay, so another very famous monastery is Noravank Monastery from the 13th century. This is nearing the capital of Yerevan. So Noravank and the Tatev monasteries are the most famous monasteries in Armenia. This one's really cool. It's got reddish stone, and you can tell where it comes from. Comes from the surrounding mountains around this monastery. So there was a first floor room, and then to get to the second floor, you had to walk up these steps. Okay, so that was cool. This is my favorite shot of all of Armenia. I'm just outside of the city of Yerevan, and you're looking at the big peak of Mount Ararat. So it's so big, you have clouds all the way around it, and you really need a clear day to be able to see it. Oftentimes, it's completely enveloped in clouds. This is a famous church. There are all kinds of pictures and paintings of this shot here. But pretty cool to be able to take this photo. You can see a wider angle. This is the big peak, which you're looking at here, and here's the smaller peak of Mount Ararat. So pretty amazing to see. Technically, it is in the nation of Turkey right now, but it used to be part of Armenia. Okay, so this is a passageway going straight underground. This is a metal ladder. It's in this church complex. It is a dungeon. You can walk or climb down here and see this dungeon. It's a big room. It would have been pretty dark without light down there. There was a very famous guy kept in this prison for about 13 years. His name was Gregory the Illuminator. He is the one who is credited with bringing Christianity to Armenia in about AD 300. I believe he led the king of Armenia in about AD 300 to the Christian faith. Okay, so next we have a really interesting church complex ruin in the north of Armenia. We are in the Lori province. The scenery had completely changed. It's kind of like the Swiss Alps up here. Really pretty. There's a great vista, great view toward the left. So I'm on top of a building here looking over. Here is the portico, I guess, and there was a building below. This is the main structure. There were some other buildings on the other side. So this was really amazing to see. We're near a town called, which I mentioned earlier, Alaverdi in the north part of Armenia. So this is a cafe of sorts just below this ruin. A lady and her husband ran this out of their front yard, and so we had a great time here. We had some pastries and some strawberry juice and some Armenian candy. Had a great time here. This was just so fun to see. So you have all kinds of cafes like this all over the place, and a good way to experience Armenian hospitality. Okay, so again in the north in the Lori province, this is the Cayenne Fortress. This took about 30-40 minutes to hike to. Not a super long hike, but really nice. Came up here and hiked on the ridge of this mountain. And you can see what I was hiking toward here. This is the fortress, another shot of the fortress here. And the views were just absolutely stunning up at this fortress. Okay, so you have the Lori Province campsite here. This is where we camped for a couple of days. This is the best camping location I've ever had in my life. We were on a mountain plain. You can see the campsite here. We were in front of a stone structure that looked like it used to be a livestock shelter. So we hiked down the next day, got across the ridge, went up to this mountain and plain, and did a lot of hiking to a town in this direction. Saw a little scorpion, saw a horse. There were cattle in the area, and here is the sunset. So this was just absolutely amazing. Okay, so the next day, as I mentioned, hiked across to the other side. This is the plain, a really nice area. We hiked up to a mountain and saw this old church. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but there are an amazing amount of old fortresses and churches all over Armenia that you can see like this. Some are fairly easy to get to, others like this take some effort. So we went inside, and you can see the ceiling here. And there was a side room, and you have a pulpit, it looks like. So we were going to Ankner. I might be mispronouncing that, but we're going to a small town, again, near Alaverdi. Okay, so got to the town, and this is a very well-known church still in use called Hagput, again, near Alaverdi. And toward the back, there was a big graveyard, and this is one of the gravestones. So this is very common in Armenia. You have images of the person or the people who were buried here, and these are engraved on the stone. And this was actually quite shocking. This looks like it's telling you a story. It shows you how this family died. It looks like their car went off a cliff. So that was quite sobering to see, but very interesting how these stories are told in graveyards in Armenia. Okay, so here is an airplane in the same town. This is the MiG, and this is the MiG Museum, dedicated to the guy who designed the MiG. So if you know anything about aircraft, you know that the MiG played a huge role in the 20th century in terms of combat. Okay, so here are some action shots. I took this when I was coming up the mountain. I showed you this earlier. I was going down the mountain. This is me coming up. I had just crossed the river. Going up a mountain here. I have all my gear on right there. That took a lot of thinking through. And here I'm crossing the river, a little bit precarious, a little bit more than I wanted it to be, but I made it across. And here I am on the Ambeard Fortress, which I showed you earlier. So part of the reason why I'm showing you these photos is that it's really important if you go on a trek like this or on a trip, try to find someone in your company who knows how to take photographs. I was traveling with a buddy of mine from school, and I knew he was a really good photographer. So I asked him, hey, if you ever see me in a place where there would be a good picture, please take a photo of me, and I'll do the same for you. And this turned out really great. He just took all types of photos, and I didn't realize he was doing it. But he did a great job, and I just would not have had these shots if he had not done that and if I had not asked him. So I recommend this to you. Try to find someone on a trip that you go on in the future that can take good photographs and offer to do the same. It will pay off. Okay, so we are getting ready to go to the cave city here across the suspension bridge. This is our trekking company. We had a great time. As you can see, Armenia has a lot of amazing places. It has an amazing history. The nation of Armenia traces its beginning back about 3,000 years, but as a people group, they go far beyond that. So they have an amazing history. I definitely recommend Armenia. If you want to go to a very interesting place with great food, great history, nice people, if you want to see a lot of beautiful places, Armenia is something to consider. It's very affordable. It felt very safe, and I plan to go back again. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you will visit Armenia sometime in the future and maybe do some trekking there. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye.